Hello everyone, Republic Jim here. Just wanted to introduce my new utility sled, and I'll be getting into some of the modifications that I do later. So far it's pretty much just stock. I did add a snap ring on the back for attaching a belaying rope if I need to, and put some big shackles on the front to clip my tow rope onto. Later on I'm planning on changing those out, but it's good enough for the moment. And I have my old sled sitting inside there just for comparison on the size. They're both these Ciroc, or however you pronounce it, sports sled, same brand. My old one was a 26 by 48, and the new one is 32 by 61, so quite a bit more capacity. I am going to be doing various modifications to it, but right now I'm just getting ready to take it out on an overnight snow camp out. So haven't had a chance to do too much yet. I'm going to give it a shot and try out some other uses for it, see how it handles in the snow and all that. I do anticipate it'll be a little bit harder to pull than the little guy here, because this one being narrower, it's not going to have as much drag on the snow as this big one does. It'll be plowing through a little harder, and of course I can load quite a bit more gear in there if I want. So I'm going to hook up my harness and pull it with the lanyard, and I've done a video in the past about my self-braking pull system that works pretty well going downhill, and I'll put a link to that in the description. But I will update with some of the other possible uses, things that I do with it as I go along, and also as I get the other stuff that I want to modify it and get that done and show what I have done. But this is where I'm at for the moment. So this is one of the ideas I had for a larger sled, and it worked out very well because it's 61 inches long. It's still a little bit short. I'm 5'9", so it certainly was cramped. I had a choice of laying with my legs curled up, or if I wanted to stretch out, then I had to put them up over the end, which actually wasn't really uncomfortable. But I carried a couple of pieces of plywood in the bottom of the sled, and then I just grabbed some chunks of wood, set the plywood on there, set the sled on it, so that got me up off the ground and made it much more insulated. And then I have some bubble foam insulation down on the bottom to help insulate that a little bit more. And then I threw my bedding system in. Once I got it set up there, I just loaded that up in there, crawled in. It was very stable. It was warm. When I first crawled in, it felt just a little bit chilly on the bottom part of it there on my back, but it warmed up quickly, and then I never had any problem with warmth. Of course, some of that's due to my bedding system, but just having the sled to be able to get up off of the ground really makes a difference. And I'm sure that if it was extremely cold and I felt the need to have a fire, then having that airspace underneath there would allow the warmth to get under, and some of that would kind of work its way up through from underneath, as well as the fact that the black plastic would absorb some warmth from any, the radiant heat from the fire. So kind of an interesting use for the sled. I'm pleased with that. I have a few other things I want to try out, and of course I still need to get my other hardware and such to do some modifications on it, but definitely a good first impression from spending the night in it. All right, here I am back in the barn. Now the weather is really warmed up. We've had several days of 40-degree temperatures and rain, and it's just a slushy mess out there, but it's a good time to work on stuff inside. I got some more of my hardware. As you can see, I got a cargo net here that has a whole bunch of these lovely plastic hooks that can be stuck on wherever, and they're big enough to really just hook right over the edge of this thing, so that should work out perfect. It's like a 2 foot by 3 foot, I think, that expands, of course. You stretch it out, so should be just ideal size to hold various stuff in there when I'm hauling it around. And then I got these couple of these gigantic snap clips. So I got rid of the big shackles on the front and putting those on instead, which makes it a little easier to attach things and has much more play than those shackles did. So the other little tow rope that I have with the hooks on either end is the one I normally use on my smaller utility sled for hauling firewood. So I really don't want to keep swapping that back and forth. So what my plan is I have an old 1-inch rope from a fall arrest system, and as soon as I find that one, I'm planning on cutting a length off the end of it and just, you know, get it the right length that I need, tie figure 8 on a bite on each end and hook them on this. That'll be a good place to attach my other lanyard like I have in my self-braking tow system. Also, you can see the foam bubble insulation stuff that I have. That's taped down in the whole length of that, and definitely helped with insulating it a bit when I was sleeping in the thing last weekend. And also it has enough grip to it that I think it'll help keep things from moving around so much, like if I'm just hauling some loose stuff in there. So should be pretty useful. And then I got this other lovely item for packing my gear in, because wrapping it up like a burrito in a tarp does work, but kind of inconvenient, and the tarp can come open if it's not strapped down really well. So in the spirit of repurposing, as I like to do, I came across another item which I was able to buy on Amazon, and that is a storage bag for an artificial Christmas tree. And I actually ran into this at work when they were going to put away the Christmas decorations for the year. I ended up getting a slightly different model from what they had just because of the dimensions, but and it's meant to sit upright and kind of expand out wider. But for my use, it works best to lay it down sideways in here. It has the full-length zippers that wrap around, and I can just open it up, and it has this Has a really nice kind of rubberized lining in it, and is supposed to keep things dry and mildew free and all that. So I realize it's kind of hard to tell with the angle of the camera, but it basically is almost exactly the dimensions of my sled. Just have to bunch it up a little bit in the corners, but not much. And when I put stuff in there and expand it, it should just really work nicely to keep everything all fastened in place in there and dry. And then I can put my cargo net over the top of it to strap it all down. Or if I'm going out for an overnight, then I will put my Arctic bedding system across the top and then put the cargo net over it to secure it. I am planning on drilling out some larger holes on the sides. Originally, I was thinking of just putting some 5/16 eye bolts in a couple of these spots here with some fender washers, but then that's when I was thinking of just using bungee cords to run across there, and I wanted something where I could fix it in place so it's not sliding back and forth on this rail. But once I got the cargo net, then that kind of makes that a moot point. So I think I will just drill a few larger holes in along these side rails just to give me some other places I can hook to, but don't really think that I need to mess around with those eye bolts. I could change my mind later and still install them, but at this point I'm not planning on doing that. I may make some larger holes and you know, like 1/2-inch diameter holes, and put in some brass grommets just to strengthen it and kind of take some of the strain off these rails, and you know, and give me a better tie down point. But again, I'll see whether or not I get to that. But that's kind of where I'm at with this stuff right now. When I went on my overnight, I had 2 smaller pieces of plywood that I just stuck in the bottom, and then when I got to my site, I put them across chunks of log for my raised platform. And rather than do that next time, especially since those were some nice 3/4-inch plywood, I have a chunk of just regular 1/2-inch CDX laying around that I think if I go with the 4-foot this way, because with the front sloping up the way it does, I think 4 foot is about enough for the actual flat part on the bottom, and then just cut it exactly to the width, and then I can have one piece of plywood that just covers the whole bottom of the sled, and then gives me something to set it on when I go to make a raised bed. So hopefully I'll get around to cutting that soon. And then other than that, I have just a couple of other modifications in mind that I haven't gotten to yet, and also another crazy idea for use of this out in the field. So, and you know, if we get some more snow and it's not all slush and rainy, then I need to go up on our upper property and cut up some more down trees that I have and haul that down for firewood. So if I do that, then I'll be using a bit of a modular system to haul some of my equipment up there, and then, you know, I'll transport the cut up firewood back down, and I might have a chance to film some of that, but I'm not sure. We'll see what time and weather allows. But anyway, we'll have a little bit more to discuss about this whole system before I totally wrap it up. That's what I have for the moment. Just out doing another segment about the utility sled. And this is a improvised shelter idea that I came up with. Originally, I had intended to do this on snowshoes and with the full harness pulling the sled, but as you can see, apparently springtime came early this year, and the end of January it warmed up considerably, and we've been getting rain and the snow's mostly gone away. So because of that, I am just having to simulate conditions, and I just drug the sled out here with the pull rope and just have a real basic setup just so I can show what I had in mind. So the idea on this use of the sled is as a situation where there are not trees around to set up a ridge line. Obviously there's trees all over the place here, and if you've watched many of my campouts or anything, you know that I typically always put up a ridge line and a tarp shelter, but just have to use some imagination for this one, and we're going to simulate being in a scenario where, like, say it's above the tree line up in the mountains, or in a big clear-cut area, or maybe in the Midwest in an area where there just aren't many trees, where it's just kind of open and the weather's bad, the wind is blowing, it's snowing. You need to get a shelter set up quickly, and something that will be resistant to the wind. And you know, with the trekking poles and some paracord and such, it's not too hard to set up a sort of a tarp shelter, you know, using the trekking poles for support for making a ridge. But that isn't necessarily the strongest when it comes to wind, and it can be kind of a pain in the neck to get set up. So in this scenario, be out with the sled and my Arctic bedding system, and just need to get a sturdy shelter set up quickly. Now, at this point, you might be saying it's going to be difficult to set up a shelter like that. Actually, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Let me just set up the camera and I'll give you a quick demonstration. All right, so for this particular simulation, I'm just going to pretend that the wind is blowing towards the camera from those trees over that direction, so we want shelter from that. And just gonna get to it here right away. So I just put a stake through the snap clip in the back there just to secure that and keep it from moving around. The hardest part with this is just getting it somewhat equalized, the spacing on those poles. Quick stake in the back there to keep this in place. And even with a fairly strong wind blowing it out this direction makes it easy to unfold it. And at this point I can either stake out the sides further out and maximize the space under there, especially if I want to have room to put my pack off to the side, or I can just pinch it in tight around there for a lower profile to the wind. And then when it comes to the front here, I can either stretch it out and fasten it down to the ground there, or I could run a couple of lines off to the side and stake them out to create more of an open area. If I was going to have a heater or any, a small fire or any sort of heat source there, then I would want to have that front open a bit to let the heat radiate in there. If I was going to use just like a candle lantern inside for some heat, then I would go ahead and stake it down and just leave a corner loose to where I could pop it up and fall under here. But once the tarp is staked out in a couple of places, it helps really make this more rigid, and it's actually, even though it moves around, it's not in any danger of falling over. So at this point it's already fairly stable. Of course, like I said, if the wind's blowing from that direction, I would have to have other stakes in the back, either in close or out wide, but just to keep it from flapping around. But for now I'm not going to bother, because it should be pretty obvious what the general concept is. So I'm going to stop for a moment and grab the camera and take you inside. So here I'm inside without the tarp stretched out at all. I could easily pull some slack to one side and stake it out there to where I had room for my pack outside of the poles. But at the moment I'm just scrunched in here next to it, but I'm laying on my Arctic bedding system, so I am off of the snow, and I could easily open it up and crawl inside and have my sleeping bag and everything. I could also break out my whoopee and other stuff from my pack to get a little warmer if it was if I was going to be spending much time in here and it was really cold, then I likely would stretch it out just a little bit to create some space there and set up a candle lantern, which would be able to draw some air from underneath the tarp there, but would warm up this area up above here. And of course, with the this bubble foam stuff, it would help radiate the heat down, help insulate this thing a bit. And the black plastic, I think, does actually hold some warmth too. So really, it would not be hard to spend the night in a shelter like this. Obviously, I would spend a little more time putting stakes in and pulling lines out if necessary, whatever it was going to take to make this thing hold up through the night. But in general, just wanted to give a quick overview just to how easily it's set up, even under harsh conditions. Of course, you have to just simulate those conditions when you don't have them, but I think it's enough to get the general idea, and I'm quite confident that even on a cold, windy, snowy night, I could set this up quickly in the dark by headlamp if I needed to, and spend the night without being too uncomfortable or anything. I'd be able to be warm enough in here. Might not sleep a whole lot, but it's a good way to survive a night when you might otherwise be stuck out digging a snow trench or something. I much prefer this option. So anyway, that's about all I have on this topic, and the whole different setups with the utility sled. I'll probably be revisiting that with some other modifications to it in the future, but for now, kind of wraps that up. Hope that's been interesting or informative. This has been Republic Jim. I'll talk to you later.